The Labour frontbench spokesman Tony Banks has resigned after voting against the government in last night's motion supporting British action in the Gulf. He told the Labour leader Neil Kinnock that his decision was a matter of conscience.
Well, I believe that now's the opportunity to explore the possibilities of peace yet again. I'm very much in support of our forces in the Gulf, but I'm so much in support of them, I don't want to see any more of them losing their lives, and I certainly don't want to see perhaps hundreds or thousands of them losing their lives in a bloody confrontation in the desert. And I think that in view of the air superiority that the coalition has managed to achieve, now's the time to pause to see whether or not we can find a peaceful resolution to the conflict.
Many relatives of British servicemen in the Gulf have started to set up support groups. The parents of a British soldier based in Saudi Arabia have organised one such group. Mark and Penny Dunman join me now. Good evening. Well, first of all, Penny, can I ask you, how is your son coping with the situation?
Well, we don't really know. We haven't heard from him now for about 4 or 5 days, and that letter took about a week to arrive, so things have hotted up since then. He was really quite brave and fairly optimistic. Very cheerful letter. He put on the outside of the envelope, "It's no holiday here," so hasn't lost his humour. Yeah.
Now, the support group that you started, what kind of response are you getting?
Well, it wasn't so much the response to the support group, it was the fact that you put our telephone number up. And we got an absolutely amazing response to that, which was only Sunday morning, and we've had over 100 calls from people all over the country. And I must say there are already wonderful support groups going, which have been going a long time, and we've been able to put people together who haven't been linked with one, and we've been able to put people in touch with already existing support groups.
And what kind of calls were you getting? What were the parents saying to you?
Well, I think there have been 2 main thrusts. I'd like to deal with one, and Mark could deal with the other, perhaps. For me, I think the most important thing was that people were pouring out their anxieties. They were beginning to think that the thoughts that they were having were abnormal, that perhaps they were going around the bend. Their imaginations were running right, that sort of thing. And we were able to say, but nearly everybody phoning in is feeling pretty much the same. People are unable to work, unable to concentrate, feeling isolated within the community, and also very worried about their children. And we've been able to encourage them to let those feelings out and to encourage the children to let their feelings out.
And Mark, what was your impression and what advice were you giving?
Well, I want to deal with a couple of practical things because I think they're very important and will be helpful to people who are watching this programme. First of all, several people said that they were having difficulty with the postage rate, that the post office didn't seem to be consistent about it. And I would like to say to the viewers, and I hope those who I actually spoke to on the telephone, that ITN and I have been working this afternoon on this. We've been onto the post office. They've been very helpful. They've acknowledged that there might be a problem and they're going to deal with it. They will in fact be putting out a free phone number, but I can't give you that yet, for people to phone in if they have problems. But parcels, which was the particular problem, can go first class surface mail, and arrangements have been made for those to go quickly. So there's no point in sending them by airmail. If people go to the post office and they're asked for a lot of money, then say, I'm not sending it that way, I'm going to send it first class mail as is allowed. And that's the first point. The second thing is that I think we need to say that there is a problem about all these support groups, many of which have been going for a long time, as Penny said, and we've been working this afternoon on the possibility of setting up a national register. British Telecom have been extremely helpful about that.
We're very pleased to hear that. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Now, last night's Scud attacks on Saudi Arabia show that Iraq still has the ability to hit back despite the intensive Allied airstrikes. Lawrence McGinty now looks at why our high-tech weaponry is taking longer to disable Iraq than first predicted.
Allied aircraft have flown more than 8,000 sorties over the skies of Iraq and Kuwait already. By the end of today, the total will be approaching 10,000. It's the biggest aerial bombardment the world has ever seen. And it's using some of the most sophisticated technology. US naval bombers are armed with SLAM missiles. They can be launched 60 miles from the target, protecting the aircraft against Iraqi defences. What's more, the missile has a camera on board that transmits its picture back to the plane to confirm the hit instantly. But other hits are harder to confirm, partly because cloud over Kuwait and Iraq makes reconnaissance by satellite or air difficult. So it's impossible to know yet exactly how precise bombing and missile raids have been. Iraqi Scud missiles are still operating, although only in small numbers, because every time they fire, they give away their position. Some reports suggest the Iraqis have also built dummy Scud launchers as decoys.
perhaps it's unlikely that there are too many cardboard cutout ministries of defence or cardboard cutout power stations or cardboard cutout SAM sites. So, in short, I think you'll find that 90%, if not a higher figure, of those extremely smart weapons, as they're called, are hitting real targets and doing immense damage.
The American Patriot anti-missile missile has been remarkably successful in shooting down Scuds. It has the latest high-tech radar to detect incoming missiles. Nevertheless, it will take time to assess the extent of the Allies' air superiority.
I think it's going every bit as well as the military hoped. I think probably not as well as the public perception had hoped. And I'm not being overcritical there. I think it's not surprising that the public expected instant results. War, unfortunately, is not like that. It takes hard work, attrition, a process of attrition, to actually eventually produce that cumulative effect, which leads in the end to collapse.
Smart weapons like laser-guided bombs that can literally come through the front door give the Allies a keen edge. It's difficult to remember sometimes that behind all this machinery are men, and they're more fragile.
Air and ground crews at RAF Brighton Norton in Oxfordshire have been working round the clock to prepare Britain's biggest airlift since the Second World War. They're gathering together supplies of vital military equipment and medical supplies to send to the Gulf.
There is an air of urgency here as Air Force auxiliaries, only recently conscripted, load up essential supplies and spare parts for the Gulf. This a Tornado engine bound for Riyadh. Brighton Norton is the RAF's biggest base, and this their biggest ever operation. They're handling 10 times as much freight here now as they did in peacetime, and that makes this already the biggest airlift since Berlin in 1948. Medical supplies are amongst the 150 tons of freight shipped out each day. Initially, early war casualties would be flown here.
As the casualties continue to come in, so they will go up and down the country to the nearest, or at least the most convenient, National Health Hospital.
You sound resigned to the fact that there are going to be casualties.
Well, I think inevitably there will be casualties if the land battle starts.
Converted VC-10s are already running a weekly medevac service, bringing back 20 to 30 accident victims each week. There are 2 aircraft like this. Each can carry up to 50 stretcher cases.
The plan is that we'll have a manifest faxed through under a special system to us, so we'll know the patients and we'll have some idea as to their injuries when they come back.
Casualties will then be quickly taken to local hospitals. Should it prove necessary, the RAF say they have other aircraft they would use to bring back the walking wounded. They say they're prepared for any eventuality. Vernon Mann, ITN, Brighton Norton.
Now the rest of the day's news. President Gorbachev has ordered a full investigation into recent shootings in Latvia and Lithuania. He's been holding talks with the Latvian president to try to diffuse tension over the republic's claim for independence. The European community is to complain formally to Moscow about alleged human rights violations in the republics. It'll also slow down its plans for a major aid package to the Soviet Union.
Mr. Gorbachev was speaking after a round of negotiations with Latvian leaders. He said he'd been deeply moved by what he called tragic developments in the Baltics and expressed sincere condolences to the families affected. What happened would be thoroughly investigated. It was the briefest of statements, and the Soviet leader took no questions from assembled newsmen.
An uneasy calm settled over the Latvian capital Riga today. There was no sign on the streets of Interior Ministry Black Beret troops who shot dead 4 people on Sunday night. Red Army soldiers now guard the publishing house seized earlier by the Black Berets. Pro-independence demonstrators gathered outside the Parliament building, and city centre streets are still blockaded by nationalists fearful of a military crackdown. But some of the tension has been diffused by today's talks in Moscow. Latvian President Anatolis Gorbanovs described his meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev as constructive and friendly. He said he now ruled out any concern about direct presidential rule in his republic. In neighbouring Lithuania, paratroopers still stand guard at the television station, and defiant nationalists remain barricaded inside Parliament. Many now have firearms, mostly hunting rifles, and one man even donned his World War II uniform. The official news agency TASS said today that 93% of Lithuanians including 3/4 of the ethnic Russian population, support independence. And hardliners are accusing Mr. Gorbachev of bungling events there. Colonel Viktor Auksnis, head of a powerful conservative group in parliament, said Mr. Gorbachev approved the military assault, but had made the generals scapegoats. It's hard to see how Mr. Gorbachev can defuse the crisis in the Baltics. Military action has hardened attitudes there, and the opposing factions seem even less inclined to seek a compromise. Tim Ewart, ITN, Moscow.
Boxing promoter Frank Warren walked free from a London court this afternoon after appearing on a drink driving charge. He was released on a technicality after failing a breath test. Lisa Hamperley was at Bow Street Magistrates Court.
Frank Warren arrived at court to contest a drink driving charge. He'd been stopped in his black Bentley Turbo for not wearing a seatbelt. He was breathalyzed and found to be over the limit. At the police station, the intoximeter wasn't working, but a blood sample showed positive. The defence claimed the Metropolitan Police handbook used by the custody officer didn't allow Warren a clear choice between giving a blood or a urine test. The magistrate agreed, saying unfortunately there was no case to answer.
What do you say to people who do drink and drive?
You shouldn't. It's a stupid thing, and it's a dangerous thing to do. I would advise anybody not to do.
You've never contested that you didn't drink and drive, just that it was a technicality which got you off?
I've got no comment to make on that because of legal reasons and what may happen in the future.
There are now bound to be ramifications for many other drink driving cases, and Scotland Yard's rulebook is likely to have to be completely rewritten. Lisa Hamperley, ITN, Bow Street Magistrates Court.
The rail unions say the government should abandon plans to privatise British Rail and adopt a new approach to cut fares and dramatically improve services. They've announced a package of measures that they say will revitalise the railways, including a money-back scheme for passengers if trains are late.
The three rail unions blame the government for what they call an appalling and deteriorating service. Overcrowding on many trains, especially in the southeast, poor timekeeping, coupled with an annual increase in fares, up to 30% more in the past 2 years. Today, the unions launched a campaign opposed to the government's commitment to privatise the industry. In this document, called An Alternative to Privatisation, they argue for more investment, and the network should remain in public hands. There are 5 main points. Rail fares should be cut to tempt more people to use trains. If services are late, there should be a money-back scheme. There should be an end to chronic overcrowding. There should also be people-friendly services with creches and nurseries for travellers. A new watchdog body with powers should be set up to oversee the improvements.
I think the government have been extremely complacent. I think their attitude over the last 10 years towards the railway industry has been one of ignorance and of arrogance.
But ministers reject claims they're running down the industry by cutting investment.
British Rail have achieved an enormous amount in the last 5 to 10 years, but there's a long way to go, and privatisation may be of assistance. It's government policy, but no announcements are yet appropriate and have yet been made.
The rail unions believe transport will become an election issue. They argue that public opinion is on their side for substantial improvements and more investment.
Most of the Iraqis held in Britain have now been detained in Pentonville Jail in London. Since the start of the Gulf War, more than 70 Iraqis and Palestinians have been told they're being deported as they're seen as a threat to national security.
One of those detained since the Gulf War began is a computer salesman who was living with his family in this Bedford suburb. Ali El Salah is a stateless Palestinian who came to Britain as a student 20 years ago. His 2 children, Dahlia and Nima, are British citizens. His wife, Iman, is also Palestinian by origin. She's been ordered to report to the police in Bedford every morning from now on. This afternoon, she was able to visit her husband at Pentonville Jail, where he's being held with 60 other detainees. She says he's completely innocent.
It's their right to look after their country's security, yes, I don't deny that. But they have to look very well at the case before they tear a family apart and destroy the children's life and my life. And I mean, this is total, utter humiliation.
There are about 5,000 Iraqis who are resident in the United Kingdom. Since September, 61 have left voluntarily. In early January, 67 were issued with deportation notices. and last week more went out, bringing the total detained to 72. Most have now been brought to Pentonville, where a disused wing has been reopened. Immigration welfare workers who visited them believe some may be genuine refugees.
Among them there are people with British wives and families. There are people who are studying subjects which don't appear to have any relevance to what's going on in the Gulf. There is at least one person who's in fact succeeded in claiming asylum in this country. So among them there are people who have got cases which need to be put very, very strongly to the Home Office.
The Home Office says it's satisfied that all those detained here are a threat to national security, but at least one of them plans to appeal in the High Court tomorrow against his deportation. Libby Wiener, ITN, Pentonville.
Finally, joining me now is our diplomatic editor, Edward Sturton, to put a perspective on the day's developments in the Gulf. Ed, how seriously should we be taking Saddam's attacks on the oil field? I mean, are we going into a kind of new phase of the war?
Well, one thing we have learned about Saddam is we have to take everything he does very seriously, because he usually carries out what he's threatened to do. We've heard all sorts of different explanations for this action today. Personally, I lean, for what it's worth, towards those who say that it's for the sake of putting up a pall of smoke to make the Allied bombers' task more difficult. And in that sense, it's not so much a new phase as Saddam trying to keep us in the phase we're in at the moment. In other words, prolonging the period during which the Allies are trying to bomb the troops in Kuwait.
Now, briefly, the White House are refusing to rule out capturing Saddam. Now, what should we read into that?
I think it's very interesting that on both sides of the Atlantic, you're seeing a growing feeling that Saddam ought, once all this is over, ought to be brought to book in some way, made to pay for the way that he's violated international conventions. And if governments are serious about that, it will in the end mean that they have to change their war aims, because at the moment, as you know, the stated position is that it's simply a question of liberating Kuwait, not of pursuing Saddam himself.
Ed Sturton, thank you very much indeed. Now, finally, the main points of the news again. The Americans say Saddam Hussein has begun to carry out his threat to set fire to Kuwaiti oil installations. They say they have photographic evidence that at least 3 sites are burning. Another Scud missile attack has been launched on Saudi Arabia. They were successfully intercepted by US Patriot missiles. And a 4th RAF Tornado has been lost in action, the crew's relatives have been told. And that's the way the news looks tonight on this extended early evening bulletin. We'll be back at 5:30 tomorrow night. In the meantime, there'll be a summary of the latest events in the Gulf at 8 o'clock tonight, and of course news at 10 with a full analysis. For now, good night.
Hello, good evening. Well, as a general rule of thumb with the weather at the moment, it's cloudy and mild in the north. Further south, a more unpleasant mix of fog and frost at night. And it's precisely this cloud that's helping keep temperatures mild in the north. In fact, we had a rather unusual situation during mid-afternoon today, whereby temperatures in Shetland came in at around 8, whereas places around the Midlands struggled to make 4 degrees. And indeed, tonight, once again, temperatures do take a dip over England and Wales. With a widespread frost, they do just manage to keep themselves above freezing for southern counties, and once again the mildest temperatures for Northern Ireland and Scotland. So in terms of actual weather for tonight, there will be mist and fog swirling around the Midlands, northern and western England, and then cloud and drizzle, particularly along the coasts for Northern Ireland and Scotland, and perhaps just enough thick cloud here in that southeastern corner to give the odd spot of rain. Now, as we go into tomorrow, that stubborn fog does persist on lingering on in a few places, and once again there will be brightness, a few glimpses of the sun. It's the recipe of cloud and drizzle for the far north, perhaps just a touch more persistent than today. As the day unfolds, a few things happen. Northern Ireland itself does become brighter. Now, the exact opposite happens in the north of England. The cloud thickens, and with leaden skies, a touch of drizzle just slips into Cumbria, whereas the remnants of any stubborn fog actually clears and lifts. So as for temperatures tomorrow, well, once again, the very far north, Northern Ireland and Scotland boast 7 or 8 degrees, chillier the further south you come. Well, that's all from me for the time being. Join Alex if you can later on.
have the chick sticks. What's that? It's chicken fingers. Try them. If you don't, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And for the rest of your life. Okay. Lovely. Here's looking at you, kid.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
New chick sticks from the Bird's Eye Steakhouse, the best grill in town. Have a break. Have a KitKat.
Yeah. Right, I'm off. It's Friday night. And don't forget to remind your father that he's picking me up.
Okay. Listen, I've got to go. Mum says to remind Dad. What about? It's Friday night. About being picked up. Oh, yeah.
Freezing. I'm starving.
There's some chilli. Just bunk it in the microwave. Oh, yeah. Message from Mum. Remember, it's tonight, and tell Dad about being picked up, all right?
Just what the doctor ordered.
Mum said it would pick you up. Oh, and don't forget tonight's the night.
So, tonight's the night, then.
Runny nose, sore throat, coughs, sneezes, and the shivers. Help say good riddance to bad cold and flu symptoms with day nurse and night nurse from Beecham.
Now, let's see how good your powder really is.
On muck like this, my old powder had its work cut out. It did pretty well, considering. Then I discovered Ariel Ultra. Who'd think something this simple would make such a difference?
Look, with socks this filthy, this is sometimes what the best traditional powder can do, but Ariel Ultra gives you visibly better cleaning.
And with my luck, could I settle for anything less?
Ariel Ultra, visibly better cleaning.
There's fun for everyone at the Brighton Ideal Home Exhibition. It's at the Metropole Hotel from the 25th to the 27th of January. Reduced rates for children and senior citizens.